Welcome to the Chronological Bible Journey, where we discover God's whole story one day at a time. I'm Michael, and I'm here with Ben today, and we are discussing our reading of Genesis 28 and 29. It's day 10, Ben. Let's get into this.
Day 10, let's get in here. All right, Michael, I've got a pop quiz for you.
Oh,
are you ready?
Come on, Ben. You got to give me...
You're ready.
All right, here we go.
What era are we in right now in our reading?
All right, so I think we've already done the creation era, and now we're in the patriarch era.
All right, question number 2, a little bit more difficult. Can you name the patriarchs?
All right, we've been talking about them.
I hope so.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
You're exactly right. You win
Sweet.
Absolutely nothing.
I was about to ask if I got a prize for that.
Congratulations. Well, today, I'm just excited because what we begin to see is just things coming together and making connections. And I think as you read throughout this year, when we read chronologically, you have the opportunity to see these connections, I think, in a different way than you would if you're just reading a book here and a book there, or a verse here and a verse there.
Definitely.
And so I'm really excited about what we're seeing today. What I want us to do is make a connection between the patriarchs today. We see that God is not only a promise-keeping God, but He also reminds us of His promises from time to time. And what I love, what he did today in our reading is he is reminding one of the patriarchs about the covenant that was made all the way back in Genesis 13. And what's really neat to see how he is walking through this with Jacob. Now, where we're at in Jacob's story is basically, he is going to go find his future wife. They did not want him to marry a Canaanite woman and said, hey, we're going to send you back to your hometown, to your relatives where our ancestors are from, and we want you to find a wife there. So this is his journey.
A little bit different than how we do it today, right?
Right, a little bit different.
Send you off into the wilderness, go find your wife.
Go find your wife, and hopefully there's a well that you can find, and she'll be there waiting on you if we're back in those days. But on his way, he gets to Haran, and he just stops and says, we're going to take a break and we're going to go to sleep for the night. So he's camping. It's a camp out. He finds a nice, comfortable rock, makes it his pillow, and he goes to sleep.
Yep.
And what happens that night is God speaks to Jacob through a dream. He speaks to Jacob through a dream. And I want us to read that today. I'm going to read Genesis chapter 28, and I'm going to start in verse 13 or verse 12. He says, as he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from the earth up to heaven. And he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. And at the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I am giving it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west and the east, to the north and the south, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised.
I love that. I love that in that moment, God reiterated the promise to the next generation, but then he made that specific, I am with you.
Yes.
You're not on your own.
Yeah.
You're not all by yourself. I am with you no matter where you go.
Yes, and I think what's key here is in Genesis 13, we see a same type of encounter with God with Abraham where that covenant is first made. Then in Genesis 22, we see God reiterating this covenant with Abraham on Mount Moriah. Now, who was with Abraham on Mount Moriah? Isaac. He was there. So he was there, and when God spoke to Abraham, Isaac heard. So those two patriarchs had an encounter with God and heard God's promise for themselves. Now the third patriarch, Jacob, in the midst of this dream, God speaks to him just like he had spoke to Abraham, just like he'd spoke to Isaac, and it was the same promise.
And God kept being consistent.
Yep.
I love that. From generation to generation, God did not change with each of the patriarchs.
And I think it's just so key for us as we are walking through this journey week in and week out that we begin to see how God is faithful to proclaim his promises to generation to generation. Now, the dream happens, and it obviously shakes him, and he knows that this is a special place, and he makes a vow. he makes a vow in verse 26 of that same chapter. He says, Then Jacob made this vow, if God will indeed be with me and protect me, referring back to the promise he just made, on this journey, and if he will provide for me food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place of worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me. I think it's unique that Jacob is saying, if God does these things, then he will be my God. And I think what we see that happen later on this week, so keep on reading. So that's just a little bit of his story as we kind of are navigating into that. Now, we know that he goes and he makes it to his hometown, his homeland, where his ancestors are, and then he meets his family, and then he finds the woman of his dreams. What was her name?
Ben, I'm blanking.
Rachel.
Right now. Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Sorry, I did not give him the quiz ahead of time.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes. No, it was Rachel. He saw Rachel. She was beautiful. He saw her. He wanted her for his wife. And Laban says, yes, you can have her, but I need you to work for me. Actually, he's working and says, if you work 7 years, you can have Rachel. And then Jacob gets a little bit of his own medicine. Do you know that part of the story?
Well, I do remember that his other daughter's name was Leah.
There you go.
I'm remembering that part, right? I'm catching up here.
Yeah, there we go.
And totally deceives him and has him marry his oldest daughter first.
Yes. Marries the oldest daughter first. I don't want to go into how in the world that happened, but it happened, right? And then Laban gets another 7 years out of Jacob by saying, you can have Rachel as your wife, but you will have to work for her for 7 more years. And he did that. Now, here's what I want to kind of point out in this. Anytime we decide or we step out of God's design, it causes chaos. Yeah. We learned back early in Genesis that marriage was to be between one man and one woman. And in this setting, we see that they go outside of God's demand, God's design, and it causes a lot of chaos in this family. I mean, we don't have time to talk about the family issues that they have, but it causes a lot. And so there becomes this jealousy, this strife between Leah, between Leah and Rachel, because Jacob obviously loved Rachel more. Mm-hmm. And that caused issues in their family. Now, what happened is that Rachel was barren and could not have children. And then what I love is another truth is not only when we step out of God's design, it causes chaos, but we see another truth from this story, which is so impactful, is that God sees the unseen of others. What I mean by that is a lot of times there's a lot of people that walk through their life and they don't feel like God sees them.
And they don't feel seen by anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in the midst of that, what we see here is a beautiful story of Leah, where it actually says in verse 31 of Genesis 29, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, I love this, he enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. And if you have to understand, in that culture, children was the heritage. Children was one of the biggest things that a woman could provide for her family. She was unloved. God saw her and cared for her to make her maybe just feel a little bit more loved for Rachel for a few moments or whatever. And
Definitely.
So it's just amazing how God saw Leah even in the midst of that chaos that was created by their own doing in their family. And so there's a lot that's going on in this text, but I'm excited to see that God loves us. He fulfills his promises, and we can take all that he says in his word every step of the way.
Yeah, and we see with both of them, he was with Jacob in the middle of nowhere, and then he saw Leah. He was with her when she was unseen and probably emotionally felt that she was alone.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great day.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for joining us for another day of the Chronological Bible Journey. And if you are listening in whatever podcast app, if you want to like or subscribe, or if you're watching on YouTube, just click those buttons, and that will help other people discover this trusted resource for walking through the Bible chronologically. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.